Could humans realistically colonize Antarctica by the year 2050? It's a wild idea, but with climate change, population growth, and advancements in technology, some believe it's worth considering. Antarctica is the last truly untouched frontier on Earth, a continent larger than Europe, covered in ice, and home to some of the most extreme conditions known to humankind. While it has long been a place for scientific research, the idea of permanent human settlement raises many questions. Some practical, some ethical, and some that push the boundaries of what we consider possible. Before diving into how colonization could happen, it's important to understand why anyone would even consider it. As global temperatures rise, Antarctica's ice sheets are changing, and while it remains an inhospitable environment, the idea of humans establishing a foothold there is becoming less impossible. Some believe that in the coming decades, Antarctica could hold new opportunities, from untapped resources to scientific discoveries, making it a place of interest for future expansion. But this is not just about finding space for people to live. Unlike other remote places humans have settled, Antarctica is governed by international agreements that protect its environment and limit human activity to research and conservation. The Antarctic Treaty, which has been in place since the year 1961, prevents any country from claiming land or exploiting resources there. While this treaty currently blocks colonization, future political shifts or new global challenges could bring changes to these rules. At the same time, there's a question of whether we even have the technology to make life possible in such an extreme place. Current research stations operate on limited supplies, relying on outside support to function. The temperatures can drop far below freezing, and the continent experiences months of total darkness during winter. Any attempt at colonization would require technology far beyond what we currently use in temporary research bases. There's also an ethical debate surrounding whether humans should even attempt to live there. Antarctica is one of the most fragile ecosystems on the planet, and human activity, even in small amounts, has already had an impact. Could a colony exist without destroying the very landscape that makes it so unique? The question of whether humans could colonize Antarctica by the year 2050 is not just about survival. It's about whether it's worth doing at all. With so many obstacles, both natural and political, the road to making it happen would be anything but easy. One of the biggest obstacles to colonizing Antarctica is not just surviving the brutal cold, but also building infrastructure that can sustain human life long term. Right now, the only people living on the continent are scientists and support staff at research stations, and even they don't stay year-round in most cases. Their facilities are heavily insulated, built to withstand extreme weather, and rely on regular supply shipments from their home countries. A permanent colony would need to take this concept much further, designing structures that could handle Antarctica's climate without constant outside assistance. Renewable energy would likely be the backbone of any Antarctic settlement. With nearly constant daylight during the summer months, solar power could provide energy for heating and electricity. Wind power is another possibility, as the continent experiences some of the strongest winds on the planet. However, the long, dark winters would make energy storage a major challenge. Colonists would need advanced battery technology or alternative energy sources to survive through the months when sunlight is non-existent and temperatures are at their lowest. Another critical concern is food production. Transporting food to Antarctica would be expensive and unreliable, so a colony would need to find ways to grow its own food despite the lack of soil and harsh climate. Hydroponics and vertical farming could be solutions, allowing crops to be grown indoors using nutrient-rich water instead of soil. Some experiments with this technology have already been conducted at Antarctic research stations, with limited success. However, scaling up these methods to feed a large population would require significant innovation. Even if shelter and food could be managed, maintaining human health in such an isolated and extreme environment would be difficult. The cold and dryness of Antarctica can cause serious health problems, including respiratory issues and weakened immune systems. Medical facilities would need to be fully equipped to handle emergencies, as transporting patients to hospitals outside the continent could take days or even weeks in bad weather. Mental health would also be a concern, as the isolation, darkness, and extreme conditions could take a psychological toll on settlers. Despite these challenges, some experts believe that with the right technological advancements and international cooperation, a small human settlement could be possible by the year 2050. The question is whether the benefits of colonizing Antarctica would outweigh the risks and costs involved. If humans were to colonize Antarctica, by the year 2050, one of the most critical factors to consider would be sustainability. Unlike space colonies or even remote Arctic settlements, an Antarctic colony would have to exist in one of the most fragile ecosystems on Earth. Any mistake in managing waste, energy, or food production could have long-term consequences for both the environment and the survival of the colony itself. Water supply would be a major issue. While Antarctica holds the majority of the world's fresh water, almost all of it is locked in ice. Melting ice for drinking water would require a massive energy investment, and colonies would need to ensure that their water usage remains sustainable. Some research stations currently rely on desalination of seawater, but this method is costly and energy intensive. If a settlement were to grow, it would need efficient water recycling systems to minimize waste. Waste management would be just as important. Antarctica's extreme cold slows down decomposition, meaning waste could accumulate quickly if not properly handled. Any long-term colony would need strict recycling programs and possibly incineration systems to manage garbage without polluting the environment. Human waste disposal would also be a challenge, as traditional sewage systems would not function properly in frozen ground. Research stations today use special containment systems to collect waste and remove it from the continent, but a permanent settlement might need to develop new methods to process waste on site. Another major concern is transportation. Colonists would need a way to move across the ice-covered landscape efficiently, whether for scientific exploration, resource gathering, or emergency evacuations. Traditional vehicles struggle with the extreme conditions, and even tracked snow machines require constant maintenance. A possible solution could be the use of autonomous vehicles powered by renewable energy, reducing the need for human exposure to dangerous conditions. Some experts have also suggested the development of underground tunnels or enclosed walkways to allow movement between buildings without exposing people to the elements. International politics would also play a key role in whether Antarctica could be colonized. The Antarctic Treaty currently prohibits territorial claims and permanent human settlements, meaning any large-scale human presence would require major legal changes. Countries might disagree on who would control resources, how land should be used, and how environmental protections should be maintained. Without cooperation, the dream of colonization could be impossible, as competing nations could turn the continent into a political battleground. As discussions around Antarctic colonization continue, the question remains, could all these technological and political hurdles be overcome by the year 2050? If so, what kind of society would exist there? The answers are uncertain, but one thing is clear: any attempt to colonize Antarctica would have to be one of the most carefully planned human endeavors in history. If humans were to establish a permanent colony in Antarctica, by the year 2050, the final and perhaps most critical question would be, how would people actually live there long term? Unlike research stations where scientists rotate in and out, a true colony would require infrastructure to support families, schools, businesses, and everyday life. One of the biggest considerations would be housing. Buildings in Antarctica would need to be highly insulated, capable of withstanding extreme cold and high winds, and designed to function with minimal external support. Traditional construction materials like wood and concrete would not be ideal due to the harsh conditions, so advanced materials such as aerogels, carbon fiber composites, and specially designed thermal-resistant polymers could be necessary. Some experts suggest modular, dome-shaped structures that could be expanded over time and connected through enclosed walkways to protect residents from the elements. Energy production would also be crucial for survival. While current Antarctic research stations mostly rely on diesel fuel, this method is costly, difficult to transport, and environmentally harmful. A future colony would likely need to rely on a combination of renewable energy sources such as wind, solar, and possibly even geothermal power if heat sources could be accessed beneath the ice. With the Antarctic summer providing months of continuous sunlight, solar power could be a major asset, while wind energy could generate power during the long, dark winters. Food production would present another challenge. Importing food would be expensive and unsustainable for a large colony, so settlers would need to find ways to grow their own food in an environment where traditional farming is impossible. Hydroponics and vertical farming, already being tested in some Antarctic research stations, could be expanded on a much larger scale. These controlled indoor farms would allow colonists to grow fresh vegetables, fruits, and even protein sources like algae and lab-grown meat. Scientists are also exploring the possibility of using genetically modified crops that could thrive in cold, low-light conditions. A long-term Antarctic colony would also require healthcare facilities equipped to handle everything from common illnesses to medical emergencies. In such an isolated environment, hospitals would need to be largely self-sufficient, with advanced diagnostic tools and even robotics surgical systems in case of critical medical situations. Mental health would also be a major concern, as prolonged isolation, extreme weather, and the psychological impact of living in an enclosed environment could take a toll on residents. Strategies such as regular virtual contact with the outside world, entertainment options, and carefully planned community activities would be essential to maintaining morale. Despite all these challenges, some experts believe that colonizing Antarctica could provide valuable insights for future space colonization. The extreme environment of the continent shares similarities with conditions on Mars or the Moon, making it a perfect testing ground for off-world settlements. If humans can successfully build a self-sustaining colony in Antarctica, it could be a stepping stone toward humanity's expansion beyond Earth. Whether or not a permanent Antarctic settlement becomes a reality by the year 2050 remains to be seen. The obstacles are enormous, but with rapid advancements in technology, shifting global priorities, and the increasing need for alternative living spaces, the idea is not as far-fetched as it once seemed. The future of human colonization on Earth and beyond may very well begin on the icy frontier of Antarctica.